morning. You're watching All You Need to Know on Bloomberg Quint Live, and I'm Alex Matthew. First, the headlines this morning. Asian stocks are off to a muted start as concerns about global growth persist. Safe haven assets resumed their gaining spree. IMF chief Christine Lagarde has been nominated to succeed European Central Bank President Mario Draghi after his 8-year term ends on the 31st of October this year. Mallya won the right to challenge his extradition request, saying that he has become the personification of all of India's financial ills. Oil prices had the worst reaction to an OPEC meet in over 4 years after the cartel agreed to prolong production cuts, and that's because of the global growth concerns that we talked about. WTI crude ended 5% lower, the worst since May 31st this year. And Team India qualified for the semi-finals of the ICC Cricket World Cup, beating Bangladesh in their penultimate league match by 28 runs. Let's talk about the US markets now. It was a choppy day of trade on Wall Street. On Tuesday, benchmark indices swung between gains and losses on thin volumes. The US indices will have a truncated trading session tonight before their Independence Day holiday on Thursday. Renita Young of Bloomberg News gives you the highlights of Tuesday's session in this report.
U.S. stocks fluctuated between gains and losses on Tuesday in pretty thin trading on the last full trading day before we have an abbreviated session on Wednesday and a holiday on Thursday for the United States Independence Day. This all happened as attention now turns toward data that will come out and will likely influence the Federal Reserve's decision making in monetary policy. Safe haven demand during Tuesday's session boosted treasuries and gold. Gold rose more than 1%, which is a milestone for it. And that data that's coming out this week will be on private hiring, factory orders, and the services sector on Wednesday. And then on Friday, we have government jobs data coming out. Meanwhile, we did see a few stocks worth watching. Nike was mixed during the session as an Arizona governor ordered a financial incentive withdrawn after Nike decided to pull themed sneakers that may be seen as offensive to some people and some customers. Delta Airlines is also in the news. It was up earlier on preliminary second quarter results, but we know Delta is also making moves to make its longer flights of 6.5 hours or longer more comfortable for passengers. And that's a look at your Tuesday Wall Street action. In New York, I'm Renita Young for Bloomberg News.
All right, let's take a look at the Asian markets as well. Rosalind Chin is joining us from the Bloomberg studios in Hong Kong. Good morning, Rosalind. How's it looking out there?
Morning, Alex. Well, it's not looking that great this morning. Asia not following Wall Street's cues. This morning, we're seeing the Asia-Pacific Index, the MSCI Asia-Pacific Index pushing further into negative territory with the opening of China and Hong Kong markets this morning. The MSCI Asia-Pacific now trading, losing a 0.43%. We've got the Nikkei and the Tropics both losing this morning. The Tropics, in fact, down by about 1%. We see tech stocks actually weighing largely on that. Now, we've had some, of course, concerns about the global growth, those of course weighing on investors in this region. Difficult to ignore the warning signs that we have seen, especially given the disappointing numbers coming out of the June manufacturing PMIs. The factory PMI is a bit of a concern there. We're also expecting some numbers out of China today. The Caixin Services PMI number will be due in about 10-15 minutes from now. We're expecting it to come in at 52.6. We did see some manufacturing data coming out of China earlier this week, and we saw a contraction there. That was largely, of course, a result of the hike in tariffs from the US on Chinese imports. So a lot of uncertainty around the global growth picture. Now, last hour we saw South Korea revise its forecasts for the year. The growth outlook was cut, and also the inflation outlook as well. We're also seeing that the 2019 inflation forecast for Korea has been cut to 0.9% from 1.6%. Westpac seeing the numbers as favourable to kickstarting monetary easing if needed for South Korea. Kospi right now is losing 0.73%. Global trade issues, of course, and a downturn in the tech cycle has been weighing on the Korean economy of late. Looking around the region, well, we've got the Hang Seng, Shanghai Composite and CSI 300, all those markets opening in the red. Lastly, we've got Australian market, that is gaining about 0.25%. We saw the RBA yesterday, of course, cutting its benchmark rate to a historic 1%. Back to you.
All right, thanks so much for that. Well, let's talk about an update from Europe. The European Central Bank is set to have a new leader, and it's one you'll probably recognize. International Monetary Fund head Christine Lagarde will take over from Mario Draghi when his term ends at the end of August. Lagarde will become the first woman to head the European Central Bank, but it's at a time when Draghi has already signaled that the euro economy will need help, likely in the form of lower interest rates and possibly even the resumption of quantitative easing. Mallya of Bloomberg News brings you more.
It's two women at the top of the two most important jobs in Europe, the Commission and the European Central Bank. Now, in terms of Christine Lagarde, it's interesting because she is not your typical central banker. This is a woman who served as finance minister in France, then moved on to the IMF, and it's not your typical central banker in that way. Many will tell you, well, she is someone who grew into her role at the IMF during the crisis. She is someone who clearly knows how finance and international politics works, and the IMF, she has been able to draw consensus. Essentially, this is what she should be doing at the European Central Bank. But I can tell you already a few eyebrows over whether this is perhaps a choice that is too political already. Angela Merkel and Emmanuel Macron both defended the choice. They both think that she is well respected in the business community, and that will actually help her in the role. When it comes to her positions on monetary policy, it's difficult to say exactly what she will do, but it's interesting when you look at all the references she made to Mario Draghi, where she clearly praised those decisions he made to save the euro, where she praised the fact that he's taken decisive action. And if anything, the market is reading here that we are going to get continuation in this role. And most crucially, the job did not go to Weidmann. This was seen as the Uber hawk. It didn't go to a German, went to a French market. Again, betting that we're going to see just a little bit more of the same, a continuation of that dovish policy from Mario Draghi.
Maria, any sense that there will be any significant pushback to her nomination? I mean, she did make a few enemies, particularly with Greece when she was leading the IMF, or she's still leading the IMF.
She did, and the one thing is that you have to look at the European Central Bank as almost different to the other political jobs that were elected today. In a way, the real pushback will come on the political side, and this is where it may come to hurt Angela Merkel, who came out of this meeting with, well, taking no questions, and will tell you the Chancellor was in fact weakened by the whole package, and she had to abstain in this vote, we're told, because she's so weak at home. But again, in terms of Christine Lagarde, we could say she's probably safe at this job, at this position. It's more the political side of this equation that could be called into question tomorrow when the European Parliament actually meets to talk about these new jobs tomorrow in Strasbourg.
All right, just want to amend a statement I had made. Mario Draghi's term ends in October, not August. Let's talk about something else now from West Asia. Saudi Arabia's $2 trillion IPO process is back on track. Sources have told Bloomberg that the company recently held talks with banks for their role in the world's largest IPO. Manuel Baigori of Bloomberg News brings you more.
So they have restarted work and laying out the groundwork for this massive IPO to take place either later this year or more likely maybe early next. They have been discussing with investment banks the possibilities of exploring such a mega deal. Remember that they were considering that a while back, and they had to put it on hold for various reasons. I mean, those challenges still lie ahead, right? I mean, it's a $2 trillion valuation that they are seeking for. That's not an easy goal. And then keep in mind that investors will draw a lot of scrutiny on such an opaque and huge company. They need to learn a lot about how it operates. So it's going to be challenging, but you know, they're starting preparations again. So we'll see over the coming months whether or not this time around they're able to pull it off.
Is this just determination to diversify their economy? Because oil prices have been pretty volatile, and the $2 trillion valuation seems pretty ambitious.
It is indeed. I mean, and I think that is one of the main hurdles for the deal to actually succeed. I mean, Saudi Arabia has been very vocal that they want to diversify its economy and kind of like bring in new sources of income. And Saudi Aramco, one of the perhaps the biggest jewel that they have. It's going to be a great asset, and a lot of investors will look at it and they will consider this as one of the most priced assets in the coming months. But yet there will be questions about it, and also just keep in mind that for institutional investors to pour a lot of money into a fossil fuel company amid all the climate change, it's going to be challenging. But we'll see over the course of the coming months whether or not they're able to pull it off.
And that's the IPO or potential IPO of the world's most profitable company. We'll come back to oil in just a bit. For now, let's turn to the Indian markets. Agam Vakil is here to take you through the day's trade and also what's happening in the futures and options space. Agam, going forward from that $2 trillion mark, which seems a little large at this morning, how do you see trade in India?
Well, we are not seeing the SGX Nifty futures pick up too much from the Asian markets right now. But as you can see, this is something that's been playing out for quite a few weeks now. But let's take a look at how the indices did do yesterday, and they surprisingly did well. It was mixed cues from the broader markets, but coming down to your Nifty Bank and your Nifty Banking PSU as well, we did see some weakness coming through. As far as your ADRs are concerned, we did see gains in, Dr. Reddy's and Tata Motors yesterday, and they've given up those gains today, considering a 2.5% decline for both these stocks. And Wipro has done well, advancing by nearly 2%. Moving on to your FII flows, again, a day in which you've seen selling coming in from FIIs and DIs by stock worth around 141 crores on a net basis. Volumes have been low, and that's been the case for turnovers too. We did see some gains coming in from your heavyweights like HDFC Twins, Infosys and Reliance Industries. And that's probably one of the main reasons behind that 44-point up move. But as far as the futures and options space goes, early days in the series, we're seeing unwinding coming through on the Nifty futures and the Nifty banking futures, looking at 1.2% increase in open interest. As far as your open interest distribution is concerned for the last month, as you can see, we're looking at a 500-point range for now, with 12,000 on the higher end and 11,500 on the lower end. In terms of changes in open interest too, we did see some writing around the puts, so 11,700, 11,900 puts did see writing. On the upper end, it's 12,300, which does seem to be a little bit of a resistance zone. Of course, the VIX came off further to around 14.2, and the Nifty put call ratio is now fairly at the same level at around 1.4. And as far as your stocks in band go, we have Diwan Housing Finance, which remains in the F&O band. And in terms of other stocks, we're keeping an eye on Balkrishna Industries. In fact, a very interesting move, more weakness coming in there. Shraid Sasson also seeing fresh shorts, and IndusInd Bank also looking at like some shorts coming in through. On the other hand, in terms of those stocks which are unwinding, we saw Bharat Financial Services, of course, Mindtree and Reliance Infra, among others, which did see unwinding coming. It was a mixture of trade, Alex, and something that we can expect today as well.
Thanks so much for that, Agam. Let's take a look at what's making headlines across the globe now. Ritika Gupta of Bloomberg News brings you the first word headlines.
As we've been reporting, President Trump has announced his latest nominations to the Fed board. He's named St. Louis official Christopher Waller as one of his next picks. Waller was previously a professor of economics at Notre Dame University. Trump is also backing Judy Shelton. She's the U.S. Executive Director for the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development. IMF boss Christine Lagarde is set to become the first woman to lead the European Central Bank. After being nominated to succeed Mario Draghi, she's set to take over in November. Meanwhile, EU leaders have also nominated German Defense Minister Ursula von der Leyen to become the European Commission's next president. She'll be the first German to hold the post in more than 50 years. And the Trump administration has abandoned plans to add a question about citizenship in next year's consensus. The Supreme Court blocked attempts to insert the question last week, and the administration has now dropped the fight. In a 5-4 ruling, the justices said the stated rationale for the question was, quote, contrived and did not meet legal requirements. Census Day is set for April the 1st. state of Arizona is hitting back at Nike for pulling its 4th of July sneakers from stores after facing criticism that its design was offensive. The Independence Day shoe carries the logo of an old U.S. flag with 13 stars, representing the first U.S. colonies. It's an emblem embraced by white nationalists. Arizona Governor Doug Ducey said Nike had bowed to political correctness and ordered all financial incentives for a new manufacturing plant to be withdrawn. Top iron ore miner Vale may face criminal indictments for 12 current and former executives over January's fatal dam disaster. A Brazilian state Senate committee is proposing charges after investigation into the collapse that killed almost 250 people. It says Vale was negligent and that its risk and compliance controls were flawed. Vale says it disagrees with the report and the potential indictments. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Ritika Gupta. This is Bloomberg.
All right, let's talk about oil prices now. They saw their worst reaction to an OPEC meeting for 4 years after allied countries agreed to extend cuts in productions heading into 2020. Let's listen in to what some of the oil ministers told Bloomberg post the meeting.
I see the length of this agreement as 9 months sufficiently long to bring inventories down and to balance the market. So I am very positive, very optimistic, and I think we're in a very good place.
We believe that this allows us to achieve an optimal result by avoiding an oversupply of the market in a low demand season at the beginning of the year.
Hopefully, it will erode some of the volatility and it will send a message of clarity and removal of some kind of confusion and uncertainty.
All right, let's stick with oil, though. David Stringer of Bloomberg News brings us more on the reaction in oil prices in this report.
Well, as you said, a pretty severe reaction. Futures fell about 4.8% overnight in New York. And as you say, that was the worst reaction to an OPEC meeting since November 2014. And in fact, it was the steepest decline in oil since the end of May. So a pretty marked response there. And what we're seeing this morning is oil start to recover some of those losses. And there are a couple of key factors at work, I guess. You heard there from some of the interviewees. We're certainly seeing more optimism that fears about oversupply are being addressed. OPEC, as we heard there, agreed to extend production curbs for another 9 months. So there's certainly some work there in terms of addressing oversupply. What seems to be more important right now in the minds of investors is the prospects for weaker demand. It's those concerns over global growth, over the outlook for the global economy, and they are overwhelming any sense of optimism about the supply side. So demand is very much in the driving seat.
All right, let's turn to the stocks that you need to watch out for and trade today. Mishika Parak is joining us now to tell you all the stocks in news. Morning, Mishika. What's on your list today?
Good morning, Alex. The first stock on my list today is Mindtree. L&T now owns 60% stake in the company post the open offer. The company has made payments to the shareholders who tendered their shares successfully in the open offer. In Graphite, India has received a nod from the Karnataka state government to close the Bangalore plant, and production has been closed since February 21st due to environmental issues. Then we have Tata Sponge Iron. A 1,650 crore rupees rights issue opened yesterday, and Tata Steel will subscribe to its full entitlement of rights in the issue. Tata Steel will also acquire any additional rights equity share. Next on the list is Jammu and Kashmir Bank. An FIR has been registered against the firm and officials of the bank by Anti-Corruption Bureau of Kashmir. The bank does not foresee any financial impact of this on the bank, as the account in question has already been declared as a non-performing asset and adequate provisions have been made. Aditya Birla Fashion and Retail's board is approved acquiring entire stake in Jaipur e-commerce and TG Apparel for 104 crore rupees. Lastly, let's look at the important block deals. Goldman Sachs Singapore acquired 0.6% stake, and Integrated Core Strategies acquired 1.29% stake in Bharat Financial Inclusion via block deals, and Vanguard Fund and iShares Core Emerging Markets Fund were the sellers in this deal.
All right, thanks so much for that, Mishika. On to updates from the ICC Cricket World Cup. Team India sealed their berth in the semi-finals of the tournament, beating Bangladesh by 28 runs in their penultimate group game. Vice-captain Rohit Sharma scored his 4th century of the World Cup, and his 104 was instrumental in India posting 314 for 9 in their 50 overs. Opener Lokesh Rahul too scored 77 in the 180-run opening partnership. Among the bowlers, it was Jasprit Bumrah's turn to come to the party, and his 4 wickets were again instrumental in keeping a lid on the Bangladesh scoring. Among other bowlers, Hardik Pandya picked 3, while Shami, Chahal and Bhuvaneshwar Kumar picked a wicket apiece. India will play their last league fixture against Sri Lanka on Saturday. All right, there's lots to talk about over the course of the day, and you'll find all the live market action right here on Bloomberg Quint Live, but there are also several stories that you should consider reading on the website bloombergquint.com. Here are some of them. Vijay Mallya won the right to challenge extradition to India at a hearing where he said he's been turned into the personification of all of India's financial ills and risks being held in a rat-infested, overcrowded jail cell. Judges said that Mallya could appeal on the grounds that it is reasonably arguable that a lower court judge had wrongly concluded that he had a case to answer. That's according to a lawyer for Mallya. But the court dismissed Mallya's attempt to appeal on other grounds, including that his prosecution in India is politically motivated. Now, this emerged yesterday during the day, but it bears repeating. The panel set up to review the Reserve Bank of India's economic capital framework estimated that the transferable surplus, or the amount that the central bank could potentially pass on to the government, is close to 8,000 crore rupees. That's a Bloomberg Quint exclusive. All right, that's all you need to know going into trade today. Do stay tuned. There's a lot more coming up in just a short while. This is Bloomberg Quint.